Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Kennedy. This is my studio at Anchor Light, and we're going to take a look inside. So these are some of the, what I call these like wet collage or works from the Deckle box, and these have been made over. These are recent, like within the last year, but I've been doing this process for a really long time, and I kind of think about it almost like a sketchbook, where I just make these small sheets with whatever materials I'm thinking about, and sometimes they're practice for a larger piece, and other times they're just form a series or become an individual piece. And I have exhibited them as a large group last summer. Sometimes I frame them. Oftentimes I'm like gathering materials like from that I'm noticing in my yard or things that are blooming. And I sometimes make these in my backyard. And these in particular have this kind of thin, it's made from abaca. They're translucent and they have a blue tinted pulp. Okay, these are just some of these sort of pieces that I've made over time. I just kind of collect them. They sort of form a record of what I was thinking about. And I guess one thing to notice about these is that they are translucent. So you can kind of see both through them. And they also look different when you look at them straight on. Let's see. Once I finish the sheet, I also have to decide since it's translucent, sometimes I have to decide which one is front and back. I also will take these and cut them up and then add them to other sheets. I don't know if I've got some, I don't have any examples of it, but. I get like these elements are from another cut up sheet. And I make a walnut ink. So this is made with like the husks of walnut. I sometimes use it as to stain paper as well. And these are just some recent drawings sort of based. I've been working a lot with like landscape, ideas about landscape. And this series was just a recent series of drawings sort of exploring elements of landscape, but not any specific one. And I also do kind of some similar compositions in paper as well. And that's what I intended these to be, but they ended up sort of being more just as interesting as the final work would be in paper. So this piece, normally I dry my artwork under pressure and it becomes flat. This is the 8-hour abaca, and I let it dry more naturally, so it shrinks when it dries, and then I get all this really great texture of the the textiles in the paper, and just like sort of showing the shrinkage of the pulp as it dries. So and it's translucent when you have it away from the surface. It's on now. These are just some other works in paper, and they're mostly done with this different types of maybe a little bit more painterly, working with multiple colors. I have a series of similar ones at an exhibit in Blowing Rock at the moment that are kind of based on landscape. I'll take these pieces here and I'll make a lot of them and work with them install them in a large grid. These are a lot of test pieces and kind of works from different scales. So sometimes I work a little bit larger, like 16 by 20 or 18 by 24, and then oftentimes I work smaller, depending on the kinds of frames I have. So these are all paper made from this abaca pulp that some people call overbeaten abaca, that's been run through the Hollander beater until it becomes super hydrated. When it dries, it shrinks, sometimes as much as like 20%. This is what it looks like when it maybe dries completely flat under pressure. And this is the same size, a slightly thicker sheet that has air dried, and it shrinks quite a bit and curls up like a potato chip. This is one that just is also the same size, but just kind of partially shrunk. I just like dried it without pressure, and you can just kind of see the different, some other sort of difference. This is flax pulp, and this is the air dried and dried under pressure. And then these when they dry, they become translucent. So these are some also some abaca sheets. I made them a couple years ago when I had an exhibit in this space, and they're slightly translucent, and these were all just different plants that I gathered from my backyard at the time of the exhibit, and I had filled more of the window, and they're just attached with magnets onto this metal window, and because they're slightly translucent, you can really see all the details of the plants. And I really like looking at all like the negative space around the plants, as well as just the plant forms. So this is a recent project, and this was part of an exhibition that I helped organize called Printmaking in Process, and it was at Anchor Light, and it's for printmaking artists. So I work in printmaking as well as papermaking, and this is a pretty unique process. I'm actually taking creating a silk screen, exposing photographs onto a silk screen, and that includes scanning these old letters, and then I'm using a really fine paper pulp and brushing it through the screen to create a pulp print. So everything on this paper is paper pulp. I don't work on it afterwards. It's not printed with traditional screen printing ink. It's the ink is basically paper pulp, including this photographic element here. This is the screen, and in some of these works I also work with things like stencils and sort of pour paper pulp onto the stencil, and even these lines are paper pulp made with an X-Acto knife through Mylar. And this is kind of a new process for me. It's kind of experimental. These are done on a larger mold, a Deckle box that was like 18 by 24. And they have sort of just different textile materials collaged together. I was actually an artist in residence at the Morgan, which is in Cleveland, and just experimenting with these really kind of watery fields and combining them with textile materials and different types of pulp to create a finished work. They're sort of based on the idea of a garden, or the structure of a garden. So these works, of course, I make them. Compose everything while in wet pulp, and this was kind of a thicker sheet of blue pulp. When it dried under pressure, the pulp itself shrinks, and it makes these kind of puckers or ridges. And I feel like that is almost like a drawing quality. It sort of shows like the material quality of the paper, and maybe some of the pressures or things enacted as the pulp dries. So the combining of the different materials just causes sort of different areas of, I guess the best way to describe it is almost like a pressure. At different times in my life, I've lived in very like rural places, and just like being in places where the landscape sort of is a big part of the place has always been important to me, and somehow like just being in different landscapes has also been really influential to me, like kind of coming into the landscape as someone who doesn't know it and learning about it has been something that has influenced my work. Yeah, in graduate school I started, maybe even before that, I started growing flax. I was really interested, like one thing I liked about papermaking is that I could go gather plants and bring them into my practice. And then I also discovered, I could grow my own fiber. So I was growing these little like sort of patches, like fields of flax or patches of flax. And then that idea of like the connection between like growing something, harvesting it, turning that into thread, and sort of like from seeds to thread to cloth to a garment, just interested me, partially in like sort of women's history, that idea of craft and handiwork, and sort of the value of that is maybe not always acknowledged. And then also, like for me, the space of craft is really important, that as you're making something, just the time of it, when you're making, things are happening, like you're thinking about things, you're processing things, like it's a meditative space. And even though I don't really practice like textile art, I really appreciate it. And that process of making sheets of paper to me is very much like a craft, and like a meditative process. So today I'm going to show Deckle box paper making, and it's kind of a process of creating a collage into wet pulp. And I'm going to talk you through all the steps in the process, and we'll go ahead and get started. So in order to make paper, to start the paper making process, first I make some paper pulp. And paper pulp is essentially is made from cellulose, and cellulose fibers come from plants. I use textile fibers, so I'm really interested in working with plant materials in raw form. So things like flax, I've used hemp. I don't often use cotton, but that's a great paper making material. Today I'm going to use something called abaca. And abaca is a member of the banana family, and it's used in making coffee filters. And the paper pulp that I'm using has been run through this machine called a Hollander beater. This is a machine made by David Reyna, and it's a machine that's been used to process fiber into paper pulp. It's full of pulp right now, and the abaca started as a sheet. This is like a sheet of pressed abaca fiber, and I ran it through this machine for maybe 9 hours previously to turn it into a particular type of pulp that becomes translucent when it dries. Not all paper pulp is like this. I also make paper pulps that just run through the beater for like an hour and are more opaque. So once I have the pulp, the next step is to create images from the materials. So one thing about this process that's really interesting is I can embed or add any type of material, really. It usually has to be kind of thin. I'm making 2D work for this demo, but Plant materials work well. I use textile materials. I also use a type of color, the addition of color from a pulp paint that I've pigmented, and I can even stencil over the material, over the finished sheet of paper. So the materials, these are some of the materials that I select from when I'm creating a collage, a wet collage or a collage using a Deckle box. So what I'm doing with the textile elements are, I find parts of them that are interesting. So it's very much like collaging with a textile. So I love like these really old textiles, like old bed sheets that I can just tear. I'll cut out some strips. I also, and I've just collected these over time, and sometimes people give them to me. I think I'm really interested in like textile history and like the history of wear, the history of someone who made the lace out of a fiber that is sometimes the same fibers that I'm using in my paper pulp. This is some flax that came from a linen mill right here that was used in spinning. There's lace, I've got just threads, things like that. And I like the interplay that happens with these and plants oftentimes. And sometimes these kind of, like the textile materials sort of provide some structure in the composition as well, which you'll see when I show the whole process of making the sheet of paper. This is a Deckle box, and this is one of the tools that's used in paper making. Traditionally, paper is made with a mold and Deckle, and this is like a more traditional mold and Deckle. This part here is the frame. It's called the Deckle, and this part is called the mold. And in like traditional paper making or production paper making, you would scoop the pulp out of a vat like this that was full of fiber and make your sheet of paper. In this process, this is for making an individual sheet of paper. So what I would do with this tool is you can see the Deckle. The Deckle is attached to the mold, and I put it into a vat of water, and then I'm going to pour some pulp into it so I can make, so each sheet is different, so I can make an individual sheet of paper. Once I pour the pulp into the Deckle box, I pour the pulp in with the water level, like just high enough, maybe like about a ½ inch high, maybe a little less. And then I kind of smooth out the pulp before I start collaging into it. So this is kind of like a blank sheet. In traditional collage, you collage on top of a dry sheet of paper. In this process, I'm embedding materials into the surface of the paper. So whenever I push something down, that is in the paper itself. And there's no glue. The paper pulp holds it together. The other thing that happens is the water sort of affects the composition. The thread might start to unravel. this is some very fine paper pulp that's been colored with pigment. And it's in a squeeze bottle so that I can kind of apply it almost like in a line. If you notice, like when I have the nozzle in the pulp, it has a more watery effect. It disperses in the paper pulp, versus when I have it like on top, I can get kind of almost like a drawn or painted line. And I'll work with both. Some of the paper pulp, oftentimes I use linen that's been beaten in the Hollander beater for like maybe 5 or 6 hours. And then I add things to it to make it flow better. I add like a methyl cellulose type of glue. And now I'm going to lift this up out of the water. One thing I like about this process is that when I lift it up, things are going to shift and move. And sometimes that arrested motion shows up in the final work. I'm going to just add one more thing so it'll work. So in this next step, I'm going to take the Deckle off. The pulp has drained. When I take the Deckle off, I hold it level so that no water drips on there onto the fresh sheet. The name of when this happens. When water drips onto paper, it's called a papermaker's tear. This still needs to drain just a little bit, so it's just dripping from, I'm just holding it up at an angle. And this pulp is very slow draining, so it takes about 3 or 4 minutes to fully drain. And then I'm going to transfer it onto this what's called a post. So when I'm working, I will have something set up. This is some Pellon, and then underneath is some felt. It's already dampened, and then I'm gonna what's called cooch the sheet onto the post. So I just press it down, lift it up, and what I'll do is I'll lay another piece of felt on top, and then I just keep working on top. So I'll make like maybe 5, 10 of these works in a day, all on the same in the same poster. So the next step is to press the water out of the wet sheet, and the paper that I just made is right in here. And this is a hydraulic press. I'm gonna put the wet sheets in here, press the water out. You need something to remove some of the water. Once the water's removed, I can lift the sheet off of the felt and then transfer it onto a surface where it will dry. Before I had a press, one thing I did was I actually used my car. I put this entire post underneath the wheel of my car and drove over it, and to squish out some of the water. You can also use something like clamps, and just to manually press out the water But this was purpose built for pressing paper. So. Yeah, I could put it back on the table and then just like show it. So once the paper's been pressed, the pressing like compresses the fiber together, and then it removes enough water so that you can actually just pull it off of the surface. And then I would take this paper here to the drying system and dry it flat. Even though it looks thin, it's pretty strong.